I certainly take your point on that. Do you see this new order on personal liberties as related to Bezos' effort to cozy up to President Trump, who, as it turns out, he dined with hours later after this announcement?
Well, I think it's part of the pattern we've seen. Obviously, a donation to the inauguration, appearing on the dais with the documentary about for the rights to that documentary, which was 3 times the next highest bid. So I think there's a pattern there, and I think that he does fear vengeance on the part of Donald Trump that could do damage to Amazon and his commercial space venture, Blue Origin.
Tens of thousands of people have now canceled their subscription to the Washington Post. Same thing.
BionicFloodlight.com. So call 1-800-709-3319.
I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States.
I spoke to the White House press secretary this morning. Caroline Levitt, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
There's no question that Vladimir Zelensky was irritating, perhaps disrespectful, but it also seemed like President Trump lost his temper.
I would disagree with that. I think what happened in the Oval Office, I was there, was unfortunately President Zelensky came in with a mindset not wanting to negotiate peace. President Zelensky was also antagonistic, and frankly, he was rude. He picked a fight with the Vice President of the United States. He repeatedly interrupted President Trump. And so what President Trump did was stood strong for America, defended his Vice President, but most importantly, defended the American people who, after 3 years of funding this brutal war, are sick and tired of footing the bill. President wants peace. It was clear President Zelensky wasn't in the mindset to negotiate that just yet.
Well, I don't buy the notion that this was all pre-planned, as some people are saying, but President kicked him out without the expected agreement about rare minerals, and President Zelensky kept saying he needed security agreements, security because Vladimir Putin had a long history of breaking agreements. So wasn't that a reasonable point for him to make?
Well, that's not what this meeting was about, and President Zelensky was told that ahead of time. This meeting was about signing an economic partnership between the United States of America and Ukraine, which would have been good for the American people to recoup the tax dollars we've paid to defend President Zelensky's country. It also would have been a great economic partnership for generations for the Ukrainian people. That's what today was, and immediately in the Oval Office, Zelensky started moving the ball forward, putting the cart ahead of the horse. And our teams are engaged in active negotiations, and nobody wants to end that war more than President Trump. He campaigned on this, but there are steps to this process, and President Zelensky wouldn't agree to a ceasefire. If you want a war to end, how can you not agree to stop the fighting? You have the greatest deterrent in the Oval Office in President Trump, and you need to trust his ability to deter Russia's aggression, and his first term proves that he has the ability to do that.
Yeah, I would just say a ceasefire might leave all the Russian land gains intact, but here's the thing. I can't imagine
president in history, and as he said, it was great for the cameras to be in there because the American people and the world were able to see what the president and his team has seen behind the scenes in negotiating with President Zelensky's team. They have continually denied the pragmatic reality of where their country stands today. 3 years have passed, hundreds of thousands of people have died. Zelensky is losing the support of the American public for funding this effort, and it's a different sheriff in town. President Trump is not the same as President Biden. He has different priorities. He wants to negotiate a deal. President Zelensky failed to recognize that.
Caroline, you've accused the press corps of having an anti-Trump bias and also reporting things that are false. Is it false to say that the Doge budget-cutting effort under Elon Musk has been confusing as to who has to respond to the name 5 things you did email, and also that there's a backlash against among those, I should say, who think that Elon Musk is moving too fast?
Well, first of all, I would say nobody disagrees with the fact that the legacy media has been attention on this. That is largely
Is that more
legacy media. When it comes to Doge, they are doing exactly what President Trump wants them to do, which is to identify waste, fraud, and abuse in our federal government, and yes, to move quickly. We have 4 years to fundamentally transform our federal government, to cut through the bureaucracy. That's what President Trump campaigned on. 77% of the American public supports a full investigation into federal spending, and there's not a lot of time to waste. So Doge is moving fast, but that's what President Trump wants, and again, that's what the American people want.
Yeah, well, everybody's for budget cut in theory, and then when you get down to people that are losing their jobs and services being cut, different story. Is it false to say that some Republican lawmakers are criticizing the Doge efforts? Because I can quote you many of them. For instance, New Jersey Congressman Jeff Van Drew says use a scalpel, not a sledgehammer, and we have to be careful that we don't hurt everyday people. Well, I mean, a lot of the federal jobs, you're obviously
but it's necessary work that most presidents have refused to do. Every president has refused to do.
Because of the political pressures and political pain involved?
Exactly. But President Trump is unafraid, and he knows what the American people elected him to do. And Doge is, again, focused on identifying the misuse of American taxpayers that have gone on, taxpayer dollars that has gone on for far too long.
The Associated Press, as you well know, has now been indefinitely excluded from the press pool. And I know a judge in litigation, the lawsuit AP has filed, has refused to issue a TRO. But since this is a battle about the wire service's refusal to use the Gulf of America, isn't this the White House trying to dictate the editorial stance of an independent media outlet?
No, Howie. I said on my first day behind the lectern in the White House briefing room that we were going to hold news media outlets accountable if they were pushing lies. And it is a fact that the Gulf of America is now the Gulf of America. And the president feels very strongly about that. The Associated Press is an American news organization, and there are many outlets across our country who have properly identified the Gulf of America in light of what President Trump and Doug Burgum, the Secretary of Interior, have done.
Amen.
To change the name of that body of water.
Well, much of the world still calls it the Gulf of Mexico.
But the Associated Press sued us in court. They started this fight. A judge, as you said, sided with us in saying that it is not a right of any news organization to walk into the Oval Office. And I want to make a very important point. The Associated Press still has their credentials. They are still allowed to cover the White House. They are still in the briefing room with me. I have taken questions from them. The only privilege that has been revoked is that